the Salary and Benefits Consultant Study Workshop to order.
Good afternoon, everybody. Joe Patton, Director of Human Resources. So as everyone knows, or hopefully everyone knows, we did a salary study. We did a quote for a salary study. We had some back. We chose Gehring Group, a subsidiary of Risk Management, or Risk Strategies, sorry. Don't want to get the name wrong. And we started this back in August of last year, going through trying to set up different strategies to come up with a pay plan to be more competitive within the current labor market. So we asked Gehring Group to look at our current pay chart, to look at our benefits, and to review all of our job descriptions and compare them with the local market to see where we are and to come up with recommendations for pay, job descriptions, and also to look at classifications, whether the classifications were correct in as far as exempt employees or non-exempt employees. So we've done all that. To present tonight, I'm going to introduce you to John Muller, who is with Gehring Group. And he's going to present the findings and the recommendations. I know I sent you, commissioners, I sent you all the proposed pay plan along with the current pay plan yesterday in your email. So I just gave you a handout of the proposed pay plan tonight. So without further ado, I am going to let John take over and present.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having us here. We're happy to be part of this. I just want to go ahead and walk you through, these slides. We put together a little bit of presentation. If there's any questions you all might have, feel free to answer them. I have also with me my colleague, Kristen. She was a big part of this as well. Just a little background. So our firm, we specialize in working with public sector here in Florida, both from a benefits and a compensation standpoint. So for this study, we did look at the wages of 16 other entities in the surrounding area. We developed that list in conjunction with HR and with this interim city administrator. And when we looked at benefits, we did look at those groups, but we also looked at our book throughout the state of Florida as a whole to get a pretty holistic approach. So we've got some recommendations here. All right. So quick overview. I want to talk a little bit about our methodology and our approach to the project. We'll look at our recommendations. We have an idea as to what the financial impact to the city is going to be, review of the total cost to implement it, and discuss what we think you all should do next. So at the outset of any project, when we're working like this, the very first thing we do is have a discovery meeting here on site. To better understand what are the city's goals, what are some of the challenges that you all might be facing. We have a really good idea just from the different groups that we work with in the area, but still we want to hear it from you and then better understand what the scope, the milestones, deliverables are. As Joe said, beyond just looking at compensation, we really wanted to look at the city's job descriptions and classifications to make sure that we had the jobs exactly right as the work is being performed here at the city, so we could accurately compare against the other entities. So really the very first thing that we did was we put out a survey to the employees of the city and asked for their feedback regarding their roles and responsibilities as they are today. And looking at that against the city's current job descriptions, we spent quite a bit of time going through all of that, reviewing all of that, seeing if there were any questions that we had, and really coming up with new draft jobs that accurately represent what each of the individuals are doing today. We also reviewed the current pay program of the city, pay grades, the ranges that are in existence, the classifications, current payment, current employee data, looked at all the city's benefits that they currently offer, the handbook to include leave and things like that to make sure that you were comparable with some of the other areas. We developed what we call our benchmark worksheets for each position. So we're a little bit different than a lot of the other salary studies that are out there. We don't send a survey around to these groups. What we do is we go out and collect the data from each of these cities. We review each of their jobs, their pay plans, and we match them as closely as we can to the city's current jobs. And then we develop a workbook for each job. And what we're doing in that workbook is we're taking, let's say it's an administrative assistant here at the city. We're looking at the pay of the administrative assistants at those 16 other entities. And we're looking at the low end, the mid, and the high. We're documenting all of that and coming up with a percentage. So we're looking at the 50th percentile and the 75th percentile of all of those pay ranges for that job. So we reviewed all this information. Let's see, I'm probably missing like 5 other steps here, just going over them too quickly. So after we really got into the program, we did come back here on site in January, and we met with, I think, several of you, as well as the department heads here in the city, to make sure that we had a good understanding of the jobs as they are today, so that we could really make sure the benchmarks were accurate. There was a lot of good information based on those conversations. We did tweak some of the job descriptions again based on that and update our benchmarks accordingly. So as we conducted the study and benchmarked each of the 186, I believe it was, jobs, we analyzed all of that data within our team, Eric Gehring Group, and really started to look at, okay, now that we have all this information, what is this going to do? How's this going to affect the pay ranges that the city currently has? The jobs that you all have, where do they fit in the pay ranges now, and where do they need to move based on the market data we found? So we did develop new pay bands and pay ranges. What you'll find when we're looking at these, the pay bands changed. Jobs might have moved from one pay band to the other, but I want to be very clear. No one job's pay range, minimum or maximum, decreased. That's not what we recommend. So for example, somebody could have been in a pay grade 9 before, and you may see they're in a pay grade 5 now, but the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum for the salary did not go down. We're just appropriately grouping the positions with other like positions in terms of the data we found. So once we put all these positions into the new pay bands, we did meet with the HR director and interim city administrator to discuss our methodology, share what we had found thus far, make sure nothing was really strange that didn't make sense. There were some things that we had to look at more from an internal equity standpoint. For example, you might have a manager whose pay benchmarks were considerably lower than another manager's, but typically you want to try to keep the managers pretty close together. You don't want to have one manager making considerably more than another, but we do factor in what the scope of their role is. We looked at a couple of things that really come up when we're doing this. So city administrator, mayor, and city attorney are jobs that we typically don't find in other pay. We don't typically find pay ranges for those jobs within other entities, because typically those jobs are set by the city council or they might be negotiated. There's a lot of different factors that go into them. Our experience is usually we will be able to find what the exact salary somebody in that position is making today, but there's not a range that's necessarily associated with it. And then oftentimes too, some of the smaller municipalities, the city attorneys completely contracted out. So you may not find any good data there at all. So in reviewing all of this, there's one other thing that came up here. Yeah, we really wanted to make sure that we had everything in the right classification. So after we've developed the pay ranges, what we then do is we have this really daunting workbook that we like to work through. It's called compression. So what that is going to do, we plug in the new pay ranges. We plug in each employee that the city has today, their job title that they're in now, their current pay, and how many years or the amount of time that they've been in that job here at the city. So what that does is it is going to tell us who needs to be lifted based on they went into a new pay range now. Are they below that current minimum? Do they need to come up? And the other piece to that is, let's say somebody's been in that job for 10 years. They may need to be moved within the new pay range based on the amount of time they've been in the job. That's what's called compression. So we do that, we run those calculations. That's how we come up with, these recommendations that we're making to the city. Also, I kind of forgot about this, but some of the things that we observed and found, we updated some of the classifications and the job titles. We found jobs that were very consistent across the city. They just might be in different departments. So in order to get really good data for those jobs, we merged some of those positions. So we're not saying they do the exact same job, but they are in the same job classification, and there may be other duties they perform differently depending on the department they're in. But in terms of what they truly do and their pay, that should be similar. We found that a lot in the maintenance positions. We found that with the administrative positions. So we did update classifications. We updated titles to become a little bit more current. That'll help you when you're recruiting with attracting talent as well. And then just one of the observations I wanted to point out here, IT supervisor, we are proposing that be classified to an IT manager, because in benchmarking that job and looking at the role and the responsibilities, it was really more comparable to that of an IT manager in other entities. And the pay substantiated that as well. All right. So once we ran compression, we found that there were, let me take one step back. There were roughly 389 employees included in this study. So what's not included are the individuals, part of fire, because I know you all are going through negotiations right now. So those bargain positions, or the positions that will be bargained, as well as some of your part-time and seasonal employees. So we had roughly 389 employees that we ran through this. 146 of them were below the new minimum salary set. So you had 146 employees that are going to get bumped up in pay just to at least bring them up to the new minimum of their appropriate salary range. For example, here, if you look at the new pay plan, which I can actually, I think, scroll to that here. Might be a little tough to see. Your 1G, which is right now your lowest paid full-time positions, I believe they were around 31,000 annualized before. You can see we're proposing that new minimum salary is 37,440. So you can assume by that several employees are going to get a lift in salary just having to be brought up to the new minimum pay. So that cost roughly to bring, or I shouldn't say roughly, that cost to bring those 146 employees up to the new minimum to the city on an annualized basis is $725,617. There is a line on here that needs to be struck. I went back and reviewed this. There are no employees that are above the new maximums. So you don't have to worry about anybody being outside of the pay range. The compression cost, so those are the employees that we didn't need to bring them up to a new minimum. But again, I guess the best way to explain this is if I give you a pay range, a person, the general rule of thumb should be at 100% of the midpoint after they've been in that job for 10 years. So that's kind of the rule of thumb that we're using when we run compression. So based on those numbers, you have another $573,941 in cost to bring people up to where they should be within the range they're already in. These pay, something I probably should have brought this up too. So I mentioned that we were looking at the 75th percentile. When we benchmarked your positions at the 75th percentile compared to others in the area, there wasn't a lot of movement. Some of that's because the data is a little old already. So we aged the data by adding, by multiplying it by the inflation rate and trying to get you as close to the 80th percentile as possible. So your new pay ranges really are putting you almost at top of market in the area. So top 1, 2, or 3 employer pay for that job in the area. So if we add compression, we add bringing everybody up to the new minimum, and we factor in what the increase in benefits, and when we say benefits, we're talking about your payroll taxes, unemployment insurance that the city already pays on behalf of each employee, also your pension contributions for police and the general employees. We factored that in. Your new annualized impact right now is just shy of 1.6 million to implement this completely right now. And your total out of that 387 employees that we looked at, 223 of them are going to see an increase in pay right away. Before I talk a little bit more about the next steps, a part of this was we did review the city's benefits, since that is a large component of what our firm does as well. Looking at surrounding cities and counties, your all's health insurance plan is really top of the market in terms of what you're already offering your city employees. Between the health center, really what's a very low deductible in comparison to other cities, having no paycheck cost for individual coverage, and really factoring it in, this is a PPO plan, and we're usually looking at the base plan for other entities with a similar cost is usually an HMO. So we're not recommending any substantial changes to your insurance the way it is right now. Like I said, it's already kind of best in class. A couple things that did stand out are the short-term and long-term disability that are offered by the city. They're paid for by the employees. You could look at putting in paying that as the city, as the employer. But in looking at our book of business across the state of Florida, only about a third of our clients pay for short-term disability on behalf of their employees. So you are still being incredibly competitive in that market. So next steps, we have talked about the compression workbook with HR and with the interim city administrator. We will present that to them for implementation. We will work with the city to implement this because if approved, the idea would be to implement it for, I believe, the pay on March 31st. So that 1.6 million number, obviously that's going to be different for the rest of this fiscal year since we're already a good ways into the pay year. So it won't be that entire hit this year. And we will continue with finalizing and finishing up the job descriptions for the city as well. Also, recommendations as far as moving forward, you're going to want to make sure that this doesn't get out of whack, for lack of a better term, moving forward. You don't want to have to do a full pay study every year, every 2 years. Our recommendation is we can do a couple of different things. We can work with the city on being able to refresh this data on an ongoing basis. But really, the goal is to set you up with something that you all can manage. So we do provide the compression workbook. We do provide the pay plan as you see in your packet. We will work with you as to, let's say you create new positions, how you want to go about aligning and putting those positions in the pay plan. But the most important thing is your pay ranges annually. You really want to look at them and adjust them. The easiest way to adjust them is looking back at the prior 12 months CPI, the Consumer Price Index. So for example, right now, the latest number I think is January of 2023 to January of 2024. I believe that number was somewhere, I think it was like 3.9% or something like that. That's typically what you're going to look at. Look at your pay ranges, adjust them by that each year. So that way, as people move within the ranges, they're not getting capped out at the top as well. And you're staying competitive. And when you do look at doing another study again down the road, you don't have a big jump or a big increase, a big change to make. I think that, Kristen, did I miss anything? Okay. That's what we have.
So you're saying to do it annually?
You want to look at your pay ranges annually. So you're not going to run compression all the time.
Okay.
So you do have the city has an annual merit increase cycle. Continue doing that, adjusting your employees' pay based on that. But by adjusting the pay ranges on a regular basis, you shouldn't have to worry about the pay getting compressed and needing to have these big adjustments.
Okay.
Joe, do you know how many people were, or John, you might know, how many people were topped out?
There were nobody. Nobody was topped out.
No, I meant before.
Oh,
I'm not sure of the number right at this point.
Okay, I didn't.
When you
We could-
say
we could figure
topped
that
out, what does that mean?
The top of the range, and they can't get another raise because they're at the top of the range.
Oh, okay.
She had a number,
I'm not sure of the number, Mayor, but it was,
30, 40?
I don't think it was that many.
Yeah.
No. I think maybe it might have been lower than 10, if I'm guessing right.
Okay.
But don't hold me to that number.
Okay.
So. I could get it for you, though.
Oh, I just wondered.
Yeah.
Okay.
but again, nobody is topped out right now, and you had nobody that was above one of the new maximums. So that's a good thing, because when you do run into that situation, obviously you're not going to not pay the person, but that piece that they are above the pay range, you're going to typically give them that in an annual lump sum, sort of like a bonus instead of part of their salary, and that can affect their pension and things like that. So you really want to stay away from that.
Any other questions, Commissioner?
No, I'm none at this
Okay.
point.
Commissioner Smith?
You stated that employees that are at the 10 years of service should be in the mid-range.
Correct. That's just sort of the general rule of thumb when you're looking at compression.
All right, so when you took an employee and you moved them based on the new pay scale,
Correct.
and if they were at the minimum but had 10 years, did they automatically move to the middle?
No, they did not. But they are getting that they're getting that compression pay. So it's a really complex formula to explain. But they are, if they had to move up, they are getting both the increase to the new minimum, and they are still getting that compression pay on top. So you might have some people that are experiencing, I can go line by line. There were some folks that were getting $15,000, $20,000, even $30,000 in new pay added to their salary. Does that answer your question?
That's a big difference, 15,000 to 30,000.
It is,
From
but
their
you-
base salary, on top of their
Correct.
base salary?
But that's very common when you have somebody that's worked in the same job for a long time, and I'm not sure as to what their increase history is like, also in comparison to where they are in the market. So if you think about it this way, the easiest way that I can explain it is if you have somebody that's been with you for 10 years,
Right.
they've been getting pay increases, right? But if you hire somebody today in this current market for that same job, you just brought them in, oftentimes that person is going to be brought in at a very comparable salary to where that current employee is, if not sometimes higher. And that's just a function of the market and being competitive. And I explain this to people all the time. They'll say to me, well, I've been here with the city for almost a year. I'm not getting any compression pay. Well, that's because when you were hired, you were basically being paid or should have been paid at market. It's very common. I've been in HR for over 20 years, and I've had this discussion with people that I brought into my own organization where, it's kind of off-putting. You're doing almost the same job, but the person that's just brought in today, forget what their background, their experience is, they might be being paid the exact same amount or even more as you, because that's what the market's willing to pay.
And so there's no way to effectively adjust or to compensate. Because I've seen it where you raise the entry levels
Yeah.
pay, but for the individuals who've already been in the field, they're not being compensated.
That's what the compression's for. That's why we're running compression. For the purpose of this study, that is affecting that. So, for example, if we have two individuals, they're in the same job today. One's been here, let's say 7 years, one's been here 6 months. And let's say both of them have to move to the new minimum. That's going to happen. But the individual that's already been here 7 years is going to get some pay on top of that. They are not going to start off at the same pay as the person that's been with the city 6 months.
Okay.
For the purpose of this study. Now, what you do going forward when you hire people, I'll work with Joe and the HR team on that, on some best practices on where to set salary in terms of new hires as well. We've worked with Joe already on some of the folks you brought in while we're doing the salary survey to make sure you didn't hire anybody that was going to ruin the results of the salary survey.
All right.
Commissioner Nesta?
I appreciate you doing all this work and the presentation as well. It's definitely detailed and
Yeah.
complicated as well. So I definitely appreciate you taking the time to explain it to us. In reference to, because in the documents that are provided, there is a fire department kind of schedule that's presented, or at least shown.
So which one are we talking about here?
That one right there.
So that's your current one.
Okay.
Yep.
And so did we do any type of research or data collection from the fire department?
So the ones that are included in this study are the ones that are not part of the bargaining unit. So those positions, I believe it's chief, deputy chief,
Yeah.
division chief, they are part of this study,
Okay.
but we are not working right now on the positions, since I know you all are going through the union negotiations. That would be
Okay.
outside of the scope of this study.
Okay. And then on the police side, we did do that entire department though.
Yes, we did. And so this pay plan right here for police, I believe you all updated at the beginning of this fiscal year for 24. So there is some movement, but it's not as much because you all were already very competitive in terms of your police pay. The numbers that are reflected in here, though, are based on 2080 hours. So to implement this, I know you all are moving to 2084 for police. In the compression workbook, we have the new hourly rate. What we'll work with HR on is they'll need to multiply that hourly rate by 2184 to get the new annualized rate for all these police positions that are being affected going forward.
Okay.
So that way your police department is seeing a lift, and then a lift in conjunction with going from 2080 to 2184.
Okay.
And just for, point of clarification, the majority of the other police departments we looked at, the most of them are either on 2184. Some, I think, were even over 2200 in terms of what they're paying right now.
Gotcha. Okay. And then in reference to, we have a lot of different employees that provide multiple roles.
Yep.
So like our economic development director is now going to be doing CRA oversight.
Mm-hmm.
Was that taken into account when you started doing pay structure or
Yep.
putting them into their?
So when we developed the new job descriptions, anything we were made aware of at that time, we took it into account as best as we could, right? So I use this example, a systems administrator is doing systems administration work. Here at the city, they may be crawling under desks and doing some things that are more help desk. We can't really compare it against that because that's a different job classification and the salaries aren't going to be like for like. So what we will do is make some recommendations on things you might want to do in terms of incentive pay for people that take on additional responsibility. We will also make recommendations on career laddering. So if, for example, you have somebody in a role and they get a new designation or they take on a new responsibility, you can essentially move them and promote them into a new position with a higher pay without creating a vacancy. You don't have to have a new open position for them to go in. So you have to be creative with incentivizing people that take on those additional responsibilities that can't easily be captured.
Sure. Yeah. No. And that's exactly my question. Thank you. So would they move up, or in that specific scenario, would we move them to a different category band, kind of create a new position?
We'll work on that and make some recommendations in
Okay.
terms of what that pay could look like.
Okay.
That's kind of like the next step, what you would do next.
So we're trying to implement this the 31st. Is that?
That's
So
correct.
For those specific kind of more hybrid positions, I guess that's my concern is how are you adjusting those, or is that going to be
That'll have to be the next phase.
timed down?
Yep.
Okay. What does that look? I guess what's the timing for the next phases, or what's that look like?
We'd have to sit down and figure out what that is.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. So right now, should we approve this during the council coming up later tonight? This will all be implemented as is
Correct.
starting March 31st.
Starting March 31st. Yep. So affecting, what is that? 220 out of 387 employees. So, more than 2/3. And it's really, this is to level set, bring these pay ranges up on par, if not to top of market, and get the folks that are in those pay ranges paid competitively.
And then from there, because that's kind of like the main
Yeah.
skeleton of this, and then we can kind of massage as needed for individual.
Exactly.
Okay. Love that.
And again, this is, based on our experience and what we're seeing, this is our recommendation. At the end of the day, you will still need to look at what you need to do if you have hard to fill positions or these different roles, what can you do to incentivize, to make sure you're attracting good people and more importantly, retaining them. I can tell you all day long what you need to get somebody in the door, but you really need to focus on keeping your people, because I can give you all kinds of statistics on how much more expensive it is to replace somebody versus keeping the good people you already have.
Sure. And then, so our contract with you it extends beyond this then.
So our contract is to complete this portion of the study, the job descriptions and the benchmarking.
Okay.
We can certainly talk about, what might be needed down the road and if there's any additional work that we need to do on behalf of the city.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the one other thing, and sorry for all the questions, that you had mentioned short or long-term disability.
Yep.
I guess walk me through, or is
Sure.
there a lot of benefit for us to provide that? I know you said.
Yeah, so it's something that I see more of within our client base coming up. And I think in public sector, maybe not as much, but it is pretty typical now to see employers providing employer-paid short-term and long-term disability. It's usually not a gigantic cost. It doesn't necessarily move the needle. But then when I went back and looked at our groups, like I said, only about a third of the public sector groups we work with are offering it paid for short-term. And the number was like less than 5% for long-term disability being employer-paid. As I say, I looked really, I even had one of our colleagues who's more of a benefits expert than I am. We really couldn't find a lot of fault in what you're offering in terms of insurance benefits to your employees right now.
Okay.
It's very strong, top of market.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let me ask one other question. You mentioned
Sure.
that you did not take a look at our part-time employees.
Yep.
So at what point would we address them?
I'll speak with Joe. I think we will be able to address those. That probably doesn't take a lot of work in terms of looking at where others are being paid. That's more, we need to figure out what the jobs are, what they're doing, and where do we need to think, where should we set that minimum pay for those part-time and seasonal employees to make it attractive? Because I know you all are competing with even private when it comes to a lot of those positions in the area.
Commissioner, on the part-time employees, the majority of the part-time employees, there's probably less than a handful that are regular part-time employees. The majority of those are seasonal employees that work in the recreation department. And they'll start out, and generally we've always started them out what our base is, and the base would be 18 now, based on your adoption of the study. So they would move to the $18 an hour.
Which I know that's kind of like almost the benchmark we were trying to get to, because if you look at Universal Orlando, I know they're not direct competition, but let's be realistic. If somebody's doing a customer service role here, they could go do a customer service role there, and their starting pay is in the $18 an hour range. So now you are competitive with the people that could take, some of your more entry level and or I should say city facing roles.
Got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Did all the commissioners get the job description survey? I don't know if they did. Chuck, do you know if they got
No, I don't.
the job description? Just so they would have, just to I mean, it's a really detailed.
Yeah.
Oh, the workbook, I don't think they got the actual.
No.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Can you just send that, Joe, just send it to the commissioners, just so they've got, it'll answer some of, I think, Commissioner Nesta's questions.
The actual survey that went out for the job description?
Yeah. Yes,
The results that we collected. Yeah.
not the results.
Okay. The survey itself.
Yeah, just so they, it's a really, yeah. And
It might overwhelm you a little bit. It's pretty thorough.
It's yeah, I was, yeah.
I'm used to that here. Always drinking from a fire hose.
And the other question I have is, can you list out the municipalities that you were
Sure.
benchmarking us against?
You have it, Kristen? Good thing we have technology with us. Oh, that's right. So it was the city of Orlando, Orange County government. We did look at all the sheriff's offices, so Orange County Sheriff, Osceola, and Seminole Sheriff for PD. City of Winter Park, City of Ocoee, City of Winter Garden, City of Maitland, Osceola County government, City of Kissimmee where we could. They were a little fickle on giving us their data. Seminole County government, City of Longwood, Lady Lake, City of Oviedo, and City of Leesburg. So really all your surrounding neighbors.
Yeah.
So, if I may, like Kissimmee, they've been aggressive with their salaries, if I'm not mistaken, on some of their positions, especially on the police.
Yes and
with
no.
that. Do we take out kind of outliers? Do you?
So yeah, that's a great question. When we look at starting to create the pay bands, we do. So the first thing that my team did, we sat down and we went over each one of these benchmark workbooks again, and we looked at if something doesn't look right. So, based on experience, if I know, for example, a senior accountant is usually somewhere in the ballpark of 75 at the minimum to 95 or 100 at the high end, if I start seeing senior accountants that are in the 120 range, that makes, my antennas go up, and we go back, we look at the job, we start trying to figure out if it's really something we should compare. Sometimes when it's a county versus a city, we know the county's got much larger resources usually. We don't usually throw that out completely unless we really think we should. But again, at the end of the day, if Kissimmee's being aggressive, the city of Apopka should be aggressive too. And when you take the 75th percentile, that's not necessarily the average plus. What it's looking at as 16 other numbers, it's saying the 75th percentile. It may be an exact number, it may be a calculation of that number. I would say overall, when we looked, the two common ones, the two entities that their pay was higher already than Apopka's were typically Orlando and Orange County government.
But they're much larger entities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But based on this, you are now in direct competition, or in some cases, even a little bit stronger than some of those entities based on these recommendations.
Cool. Any other questions? Well, I'd sure like to thank, your team,
Absolutely.
and Joe and Chuck and Blanche for, really working hard to get us a really good salary survey. It's been a long time, and so it's nice to, to know where we are, and so that we can compete with other municipalities for good quality workers and keep the ones that we've got. So thank you. Thank your team.
Well, I appreciate it, and I want to thank you all on the council, Mr. Mayor, and the folks, Joe, Chuck, and everybody that was involved, because, we got a lot of input from staff level, directors taking time out of their day when we came here on site. We appreciate everybody's time and cooperation in this as well.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we'll close the public hearing. We'll see you back